This one's going to sting a little, and it did when she said it to me on the podcast. You are not burnt out because your team or audience won't listen. You're burnt out because you're clinging to an illusion of control. I sat down with the incredible Dr. Jessica Kriegel. She's a culture strategist, #1 best-selling author of Surrender to Lead, and we unpacked why so many leaders and entrepreneurs are exhausted, we're overscheduled, and still not getting the behavior or the results that we want from their teams or ourselves. So we get into why most of us end up trapped in endless meetings, KPIs, or this cyclical action, but yet we still feel alone and stuck. And it's because we're trying to manage everyone else instead of the only thing that we can actually control, which is ourselves. And so Jessica is an absolute rock star. So if you're ready to shrink your world to what you can control, get out of the action trap and lead from Surrender to Fear, which is her incredible book that I have read and I loved, then this conversation is for you. So let's jump into the show. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Mind and George Show. I'm geeking out because culture is the current topic right now. It has been coming up from leadership to culture. And today's guest, I feel like it's an understatement to say she's an expert in it, but I'm going to share that in her bio in a minute. But before I do, I want to welcome my new friend, whether she agreed or not. I'm calling us friends, Jessica, to the show. So Jessica, all the way from Sacramento, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Me too. And I'm actually extremely excited to take notes and to listen because I geek out about this. I coach this. I teach this every day. And I'm already in doing my research. Like I want, yes, what she said, how she believes. So I'm stoked to have some more angles and then be like, well, Jessica said, since they don't listen to me most of the time anyways. So I'm excited.
Well, I'm excited then. We're going to have fun.
Oh, we are going to have fun. And before we dive in, right, you've been doing this for a hot minute, if I can be a younger generation right now and drop that. But, somebody listening to this, when I think about like leadership, when I think about culture, I think the mistake that people make is they think it's only for big companies. But like truthfully, like culture applies to you, to a small team, to a medium team, to a large team, and even to your family, your friend circles, and all of it. So for, the person listening right now, if they take anything that you say today and apply it, whether it's surrender or any of the lessons that you're going to share, like what do you think is possible for them in their business and their life?
I think what will be possible is that they can unleash the potential that they have to drive results while at the same time reducing their internal psychic pain that they're currently going through to get there. That's the whole reason that I exist in this professional world, is to help people do that, drive results, and have it be maybe a little easier.
Yeah, without all the self-sacrifice and that suffering has to be hard and like I rip my hair out kind of
Yeah,
moment. Yeah.
exactly. We want to get less of that, more results and less of the pain that it requires to get those results.
Yeah, for sure. And just if you're listening to this, like let me give context. I feel like I could do a 15-minute bio of her from everything that I found, but let me give you like just a little bit of an overview so you know who's dropping knowledge bombs today. So Jessica, she is the Chief Strategy Officer at Culture Partners, a workplace culture expert and researcher. She has an incredible daily podcast called CEO Daily Brief, which sounds like a blast that I'm going to listen to, and Culture Leaders. She's a frequent guest on CNN, Fox Business, CNNBC, and Bloomberg. She's way more educated than I am, which is why I'm going to take a lot of notes. She has an MBA and a doctorate in educational leadership. She's pursuing a Master of Divinity. And I love this, just shocking pattern interrupt. You are a trained death doula. And
Mhm.
this helps deepen your presence as a leader. You have 2 books, one out called Unfairly Labeled, which challenged all the generational myths. And then your next book, Surrender to Lead, comes out in January of 2026. I do a
That's
decent
me.
job.
That's it.
Okay. So I want to kind of kick this off because I want to know like how you got into this, but like what was the inflection point for you when you realized like control or the facade of control was the illusion that was like really holding back performance for people?
Well, I'm such a cliche. I had a moment of cracking open because I hit my bottom I
Mm,
mean, don't we all? Those who have
yes.
something that they need most to learn, they teach, and that's what I'm doing is I'm teaching myself how to surrender by talking about it to you because, I am a recovered alcoholic. I had spent my entire life focused on me and how I could get more. Whatever it was that I needed more of at the time, whether it was cereal when I was a little kid or money and power and fame when I was in my 30s. I just needed more because I thought maybe I would feel better if I got more. And when that didn't work, I tried booze, and that also didn't necessarily help. In fact, it helped accelerate my decline, we'll say. And I had a bottom that was not a material bottom, but an emotional bottom. I was at the top of my
Mm,
career. I was the most successful I had ever been, but I was devastated in my own pain caused by myself in the amount of effort that I had put into getting something to make me feel better, and I was just searching in all the wrong ways. So I cracked open, and I mean, I just to paint a picture, there was a night where I was laying on the bathroom floor and just crying and like scream crying that I just hate myself and everything. It was like I had the realization that everything that I was seeking to make myself feel better was never going to get me there, and I felt completely hopeless.
mm,
And I had a moment of surrender, which I can only describe as I had a coincidence that was too much of a coincidence to be a coincidence, and that moment turned me from a lifelong atheist to a believer in some higher power. And I didn't know what higher power because I had never been to church.
mm,
So when you take a secular kid raised in a secular home and a 37-year-old and say, "Okay, you now believe in God. Go." What do you do? I mean, for me at least, I go to school to learn about God. That's why I'm doing a master's in divinity because I didn't want to go join a church before knowing like, am I Christian? Am I Muslim? Like, I don't know. How do I figure that out? Let me study this. And so I've been on this journey now for 5 years. I'm 5 years sober in 9 days. And that
congratulations.
journey has been a journey of kind of finding what my higher power means. And what I have learned is the more I surrender, the closer I am to that higher power. And that was a personal lesson first that then I implemented in my professional life. And if I thought I was successful back then, I mean, my career has blown up 4 times what I thought could be possible in the last 5 years because of this mentality of surrender. Then we started doing it with our clients and their businesses exploded. Then we studied the power of surrender and leadership with Stanford Graduate Business School, and the results just speak for themselves. So it is this counterintuitive approach. It feels very touchy-feely and soft, but I've personally experienced it. Our clients have experienced it. The research validates it. And I think that I got something here, folks. And by I got something, I mean the ancient wisdom of all societies have had something for thousands and thousands of years, and maybe we should pay attention to it. And yes, it can even work in capitalism.
Oh, I resonate so deeply and like same path and same age timeline, by the way.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. From opiate addiction, because I almost lost my legs in Somalia because I was a Marine for 13 years. So I got addicted to
No
opiates.
way.
And same thing in the tub, screaming and crying.
I was on the floor in the bathroom. Let's be clear.
Yeah,
It's very
yeah. I
different.
don't know what it is about like the bathroom, but bathroom is my direct connection to God. I don't know. It's like my church at home in between going to church. And
Okay.
I resonate so deeply with what you shared because it is counterintuitive and I love it. I love that you have the data on the other side as well. Like I feel what you're saying so deeply and it hit my heart to ask because I'm just curious how you define surrender.
Yeah. It's letting go of the illusion of control. Uh,
Mm,
that's a very simple I got 10 definitions, right? But to simplify it for leaders who are the people that I'm speaking to most often, it is the illusion of control that you have right now, that you as the quote manager or director or chief or whatever your title is, no matter how big your paycheck is, you don't actually have the control that you think you have been bestowed through your job title. And there is a hierarchy on a PowerPoint deck on the intranet somewhere that says you're at the top of it, but that's just it's an illusion, right? And the reality is everyone that works at your organization has free will and they will opt in if they believe in what we're doing here, and they will opt out if they don't. And no amount of policies and procedures and processes are going to transform your organization. And so to surrender it's a radical acceptance of reality on reality's terms and operating from a place of understanding that the only thing you can control is yourself. And when you focus on what you can control, which is yourself, you're focused on the experiences that you're creating for other people. And those experiences will create beliefs in those people, which is what will motivate them to take action. And that is the power of surrender in leadership. Because telling them what to do and laying out your brilliant strategic plan and then making sure that they do it by having a series of recurring meetings, that's not it. Leadership is creating movement. And you want to create movement in people, they got to move their feet because you're not strong enough to carry all of them. And so it sounds touchy-feely. Military people, I didn't know you were a Marine. Military people don't like this word because it sounds like waving the white flag. But the SEALs have a saying, which is control the controllables.
Yep.
And there is a corollary to that. The unspoken flip side is, and stop trying to control the uncontrollables.
Yep.
And so that's what we're talking about. It is the serenity prayer ultimately, but
It's
it does
tattooed
work.
on my leg, by the way.
Which one?
The serenity prayer.
It is. Love
Yeah,
it.
it's tattooed on my leg. That was before I was a Christian. Ironic, like all those coincidences that we talk about are just me getting out of God's way. And I'm like, why did I do that? And why is my entire back tattooed with the cross? And then now I've committed my life to God, Jesus. Like
Yeah.
interesting, all those coincidences. And it's funny. I love the way, by the way, I just have to say this. That was
Yeah.
beyond a definition. That was a masterclass
Thank
in
you.
surrender. So in case you listened to that and it kind of went in and out another, I invite you to rewind that again, because at the very beginning we talked about what makes you want to pull your hair out or feeling like it has to be hard. And it's that illusion of control. And
Yeah.
it's interesting to hear how you described it, because I had a quote I said on this podcast years ago that I said the illusion of control does not equal freedom. It equals prison.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like the more you white knuckle, the more you try to grab on, the more you try to hold on. And you said something really interesting at the end that I want to unpack with you, because I was a Marine for 13 years. But to your point, we never were taught that it was the white flag. It was shrink your world as small as possible to control what you can control. Right. So you can give an input, but you can't control the outcome of that input. It's just information.
I got to write that down. Can you say that again?
Shrink your world as small as possible to control what you can control.
Love that. That's so good. Mic
And
drop moment.
And the reason I say that is because I think one of the things when we hear the word touchy-feely surrender, I see this all the time where people have the word surrender associated with passive.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not. It's not like I sit there with my thumb up my butt. It's
No.
different, right? And so I'm curious what your take on that is, because I look at this and I can imagine the person listening that this is resonating
Mm-hmm.
with. And it's like, well, if I can't have KPIs and I can't just run meetings for meetings and I can't, what am I supposed to do? And I
Yeah.
know a lot of people get stuck in that gap, and you have data, you coach this, you live this. And so I'm curious what your perspective is on that. I'm like surrender being active and what somebody focuses on.
I love it. So let's continue with this military metaphor or analogy that we were kind of playing with. So to shrink yourself to be as small as you can, to focus on what you can control. What the Marines know, and I'm sure you know this much more than I do, being an actual Marine, but what the Marines know, what the Navy SEALs know, and all of the best military people in the world know is that they cannot control what their brother does. They can't control what the orders are that they've been given. They cannot control when the equipment malfunctions unexpectedly. They can't control what the enemy's doing. They can't control any of that, right? And they're experts in surrender, because when the chopper's going down in enemy territory, they're not looking around talking about like, who's responsible for this? Who can we blame for this? Well, this should be different than it is. Let's have a meeting, right? No, they're focusing on, how do I need to adapt in the moment to respond and show up in a way that I need to show up to be able to create the result that I need to create, whatever it is. And that's what leaders do. What most leaders do is they get, we're going to call it the action trap. They get stuck in the action trap, which is this endless cycle of activity of doing more, hoping that it will get you the result that you're looking for. And it's because we know that results come from actions, and results are what we're trying to achieve. And so we need to focus on actions that get those results. It sounds so logical. And so it looks like we're going to train everyone, we're going to have a meeting, we're going to do these KPIs and these dashboards and all of that activity that fills our calendar and stresses us out, and it does move the needle, actually. So when we researched this, companies that were in the action trap, they were able to grow revenue 10% on average over the course of 3 years. We looked at 243 companies with Stanford, and we looked at their purpose, their strategy, their culture, the results. These were small companies with 100 employees up to large companies with 350,000 employees. And they were able to grow revenue. So it does actually work. And there's a lot of companies out there stuck in the action trap, and they're growing, and they're like, it's working. Let's just keep going, keep pushing harder, keep hustling, right? But the companies that were not in the action trap, in that same 3-year period, they grew 42%. They
Mm.
were outperforming the action trap companies by 4x. So that's the shareholder value that we're all after, isn't it? I mean, if you're the CEO of a company and that's your number one focus, that's the compelling argument for getting out of the action trap. So the question is, how do you get out of the action trap? The answer is surrender, right?
Mhm.
Leaders are telling people what to do and trying to manage their activity in this action trap instead of asking the question, what gets people to change, to show up, to do something differently? And they think it's processes, procedures, and structures, right? And systems and technology, and then the new compelling czar, innovation czar or whatever. But people will act in alignment with what they believe. And
Mhm.
so if you want to get people to believe in what you're doing, so they will opt into the action that you need them to take and actually innovate upon what you think they should do to something even better that you didn't even think about so that you can get the result, you've got to shift their beliefs, which is a really hard job for leaders right now because in this K-shaped economy where wealth inequality is getting bigger than ever before, there is deep cynicism about leadership from frontline workers. They're
Mhm.
feeling left behind, and they are incentivized to blow smoke up the leader's behind to say, yes, sir, absolutely. Brilliant idea. I am totally on board. And leaders are confusing compliance with alignment. And then they're scratching their heads about why they're not getting more out of their people. So what shapes people's beliefs? What do all of our beliefs come from? What does my belief in God come from? It comes from experiences. We have
Mhm.
had experiences in our lives that shape our beliefs. And as a leader, if you want to shape their beliefs to be different, you have to create new experiences.
Mhm.
And that's making yourself as small as possible to control the controllables, which is what experiences am I creating? Here's 3 really quick, easy experiences that you can focus on to start. Because we're creating experiences every second of our lives, right? And so that it can be overwhelming. I got to, be a different person. Focus on recognition, focus on storytelling and feedback. Those 3 experiences are powerful motivators and change creators and activators within organizations. I would argue that storytelling is the most powerful tool that leaders have to create experiences that shape beliefs. And if you leaned into storytelling, which again is one of these touchy-feely kind of ideas, it feels like qualitative, whereas many leaders want to do data-driven insights, right? Well, that data tells a story, and if you find the story and tell the story, you can shift people's beliefs. We are moved by stories. That's why Hollywood is so successful. And so the question is, how do you find the moments of the stories that you can amplify and tell so that you are shifting beliefs so that people will give you that coveted discretionary effort that you want them to take so that you
Mm.
can get results and get those 4x revenue growth that Stanford found in the research.
Yeah, well, I think if this is going to be one of those episodes where I'm like, go rewind that again, because that's the definition of culture,
Yeah.
right? And to even tie some of this together, just in what I've heard already, which I'm in love with in this culture, and I love the focus on beliefs, right? There's this other part of it where when you white knuckle, when you try to control, you're actually preventing other people's buy-in and growth from happening for them to become that leader or to become that person that can only be modeled. And when you said you're always creating experiences, intentional or not, they're always being created. And I
Yeah.
found most of the time, if we're not being intentional about what we're creating or why we're creating it, then we're creating an unintended experience that doesn't help culture. It doesn't help performance. It actually erodes it away. But our default is the action trap. Well,
Yes.
I got to do something. So let me run a meeting. Let me give a KPI. Let me give an order. And then you get quiet quitting and you get
Yeah.
what you called, right? Like I have 4 levels of buy-in that I teach from one of my clients, but it's compliance and then compliance, commitment, contribution, and conviction, right? And
Mm,
what you end up with is a lot of compliance. And that
yeah.
compliance is like, I'll do it if I have to do it, if I'm told to do it. And like commitment is I'll do it because I'm committed to this. I'm not like fully bought in yet. But then contribution is like, I see the big picture and I'm going to go above and beyond. And then conviction is what we all want, which is like, I'm driving this vision, whether you're in my way or not, because I'm on your team and I like see my place. But I think the other thing that I just want to add as a thought when we're talking about, and I'm just putting a label of culture on this, the other mistake that I see is I see so many people thinking that culture is created through the action trap. Well, I checked the box. I
Right.
sent Jessica the message. I asked her how her morning was once. Why hasn't
Yeah.
anything changed yet?
Yeah. Because people can feel authenticity and they just know at a soul level, I believe, an
Mhm,
intuitive know, even if they don't consciously know, there's an inner knowing that exists that af- over time at scale with all of the people that you interact with, that drives your success or doesn't. You can't fake it enough to be a really successful leader over a period of time, you know? And but what's interesting is if you look at every great leader that's been written about in the history books, in the history of man, they all have one thing in common and only one thing. They got a result. If they didn't get a result, then they're not written about, right? We don't write about fail leaders who just always failed and then died. Like we don't have those stories. So they got a result is the only commonality. And you can get results by being a tyrant, or you can get results by empowering your team to outperform you and outshine you towards a common purpose that you're all convicted in creating, right? And so which leader do you want to be? And which one is more effective? I mean, I would argue that tyrants have a shorter shelf life. Although there are many in power today that you could point to and say, well, Putin's still going,
mhm,
right? I mean, there's plenty of people we can point to that do it the bad way. And so then really it's just up to you on how do you want to be as a leader.
mhm, mhm. Which I love because one of the first things I do when I go into my clients to help them scale is I'm like, what's the mission? What's the movement? And a lot of the times the goal they spit at me is revenue. I'm like, no, 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 no. That's not a mission. That's not a movement. That comes after an equal sign. That's a byproduct,
Yeah.
right? But to your point earlier, which I love, is when we're talking about like we can call it buy and we can call it culture, we can call it your team being able to support you and operate with agency because you've surrendered. Human beings need to believe in something to invest in something.
Yep.
And I've yet to do this in 20 years and coaching thousands of people and meeting probably tens of thousands of employees at this point where like they come to work and they're like, I'm so excited because my company is trying to add $8 million a year to the top line. Or I'm so excited. Like that's not why they're there. That's something that they're
No.
helping to produce. But that belief, that investment that they have has to come from something that they believe in, which is what I tell everybody. Like if your vision has money associated with it, you don't have a vision. The
Yep,
vision is
exactly.
agnostic of the money or how big you want to be or how many clients you want to have, because that's the emotional driver that's needed for somebody to attach onto because it's their personality choosing to align or agree with this personality or this mission, not like what things can we execute.
Yeah, when I joined so I had a business that got acquired by Culture Partners, which is where I work now, and when I joined, we had a vision to, um, build the company to be $100 million in revenue by 2025. And it was so uninspiring because we're a private equity backed company. And so it's like, do I really care about creating $100 million in revenue for our PE overlords? Like,
Mhm,
no. And I'm the chief strategy officer that just sold my business to this company. So so I've got equity. If anyone on the in the firm were to care, it would be me. And I didn't care. And so one of the things we did is, a lot of it really is just messaging and
Mhm.
storytelling. We went into our little pricing calculator and we figured out, if we get to $100 million in revenue, how many lives will we have impacted with our message? How
Mhm.
many employees at our clients will be touched by the content that we're sharing that we do believe is going to make the world a better place and make their lives better? And the number was 5 million. So we changed our vision from $100 million to 5 million lives impacted. And it's the same goal. And the PE overlords are thrilled because they know 5 million lives equals $100 million. But the people are not focused on the number, they're focused on the lives. And
Mhm.
it works. It just works. It just requires a little bit of thought.
Mhm. Well, it's so funny since we're in the military vein. I used to teach precision long range shooting. I still do for fun, but it's ironic because I always joke with people, and I use this when I'm teaching it in person, where I'll like draw the target that somebody's shooting at with a pistol, and then I'll draw the sights of the pistol, and I'll put them up, make it covered and aligned how it's supposed to be, and I'm like, all right, so you want to hit the dead center of that target. What are you looking at? And they're all like, the target. And the ironic thing is when you're shooting a pistol, if you stare at the target, you miss the target. You make a rainbow
Mm,
over the entire target. And they're like, where am I supposed to look? I'm like, you look at the front sight post. If that's in focus and the target's blurry, you hit dead center of the target every single time.
mm,
Every single time I've seen somebody make a revenue goal or a size goal, they're not focused on the inputs or the impact that it's making, and they miss that target every single time. But to your
exactly.
point, if you focus on like, hey, what to tie all this together, what is in my control? Like, what can I influence through my action,
Yeah.
through my behaviors, through my words? And then what am I applying those to? Like, what impact am I trying to make? When you align those impacts and those inputs, the equal sign is the target. And it never
Hmm.
misses at that point
Yeah.
because you're not trying to control the story.
And that's accountability. All
Yes.
right. I mean, that is, and accountability is interesting. It's got such a bad rap right now because it feels like well, first of all, we only hold someone accountable when something goes wrong. Right. And so, in a business environment in which we are, let's face it, all in competition with each other, even within one company, right? There's three senior directors and only one open VP spot. Like, I'm looking at my left, I'm looking at my right. I'm like, you guys are going down,
Mhm.
colleagues, because we are in competition. There's less resources at the top for less people, or more resources at the top for less people. So, what does that mean? It means I have to be focused on, I have a series of responsibilities that have been given to me, right? You, my boss, decided at an executive retreat that I wasn't even at that I'm now going to be responsible for a new initiative. I That doesn't mean I'm taking accountability for it. That just means you made me responsible. In order for me to take accountability, I have to make a personal choice.
Yep.
And that's not something that you can control as my boss. You can control what I'm responsible for, but not what I take accountability for. So when you frame accountability as that personal choice to focus on what you can control, it is actually quite empowering because
Mhm.
suddenly people are taking, they're not waiting for it to be given to them. They're taking accountability. And we talk about, you're either above the line or below the line. And below the line is the blame game. It's pointing fingers. It's, that's not my job. It's all of the victim mentality excuses that you hear at work in all the meetings. I mean, we did research on this. 50 to 75% of time spent in meetings and corporations is spent below the line. Above the line is making that personal choice to focus on what I can control to drive key results. And if you can get yourself up there, now you've untapped. That gets you out of the action trap. That gets you focused on yourself. On That's surrender right there, is focusing. So one of the things you can do, this is actually a good little tool. If you are a leader and someone comes into your office or calls you on Zoom or whatever, texts you and says, I've got this problem, insert diatribe about problem. There are 4 questions that you can ask them to help lift them above the line if they are below the line. The first question is, what's going on? Easy enough. Let them talk, right? This is the diatribe. Second question is, interesting. Okay. What about that can you control? And you get them to focus. Then they tell you what they can control. And then you ask the third question. Okay, well, what else could you try? Just get them to brainstorm now that they've focused on what is within their control and they're not complaining about how the sales team didn't or the production team didn't. just focusing on them, you can get them to brainstorm. And once they've brainstormed, you said, great, what are you going to do by when? And then they set a deadline for themselves and an action plan, and you took none of the responsibility from them. They maintained ownership of the entire situation and the problem solving and the deadline creation. And all you did was be a sounding board by asking them those 4 powerful questions. That is actually surrender because you didn't get to have any input, you know?
Can you just, for me and everybody listening, give us the 4 questions again? Because those are extremely powerful.
Yes. The 4 questions to allow people to take accountability are 1, what's going on? 2, what about that can you control? 3, what else could you try? And 4, what are you going to do by when?
Mm-hmm. It's
There it
so
is.
big. It's
It's
so
so
big.
big.
I use something similar. Like I heard Dan Martell say this years ago. So I give everybody like a really easy one for leaders. I was like, stop trying to be everybody's savior and
Yeah.
allow them to become the person that you hired them to be. And so if they come to you with a problem, you have one rule. You can't give a solution. You ask them,
Yeah.
what's the one thing that's up, right? What's going on? What are 3 potential ideas they have that could work? And then what's the one thing they need from you for support in order to bring that thing to life? And I love your 4 too. I actually like your 4 better. So I'm changing it. I will give you full credit when I use those.
Thank you. Appreciate
Um,
that. The difference, I actually like your support question because that's not in mine, but the one that I think needs to be in there is what about that can you control? Because that's where you
Huge.
get them to surrender themselves.
Yep.
You're encouraging surrender in that moment because
Mhm.
they're focused on all of the things that didn't go their way, things that they wished were different, right? Which is such a waste of time.
Well, and I also love because I heard you say this earlier, and my brain like plays queen gambits on the ceiling, and I'm like closing loops at the same time. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh, because when you're talking about the below the line and above the line, one of the other things that I see happening all the time is I see leaders. And by the way, for anybody listening to this might be you just leading a 1099 contractor. This could be somebody editing your podcast, or this could be your team. Is that if you live below the line, everybody underneath you lives below the line. There
Hmm.
isn't like, oh, I'm going to have some employee come outshine me and like pull me up. Like that's your responsibility as a leader. And in the personal development world, what we used to say is like, give away what you want to get. And I'm tying all this together because anecdotally, the ironic thing is that if you want to bring culture above the line, you use recognition, storytelling, and feedback.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I think about all the people that I coach because I coach a lot of high performers, right? They're all doing 7 figures up to, multiple hundreds of millions of years. And every single time they're stuck, right, or overwhelmed, they're also self isolating and they're removing themselves further from the people that they could empower, that they could surrender to. And those 3 feedback, recognition, right, and storytelling
Storytelling.
would
Yeah.
be the perfect prescription that if they took action on one of those things that they could control, it would create momentum or positive progress and unravel that like stagnation that happens in that overwhelm.
And the barrier to that, especially for the high performers and the 7-figure, multi-hundred million earners, is ego.
Yep.
Because the better we do, the more prideful we are about how well we've done.
Mhm.
And so therefore, there's a little bit of entitlement that emerges, a little bit of justification that emerges, and well, I don't have time for that, and that's not I'm not operating at that level. And so there is ego to battle the higher you go. And you can either be operating out of ego, which is fear and a scarcity mindset, or you can be operating out of love and abundance and service mindset. I mean, it's servant leadership. This is
Mhm.
101 leadership stuff, but it is a harder battle the better you do. And it's not like there's good leaders and bad leaders. There's a mix of both in all of us. And sometimes the bad habits come out, sometimes the great habits come out, and we have to constantly be returning to surrender and returning to that love and abundance mindset, despite the fact that it does sound touchy feely. And interestingly, a lot of the people that are those high performers and those top talent and the CEOs and the people running the world are in their own little echo chamber of what works, and they are in an ego echo chamber, right? Likewise, here's the flip side. I get so disappointed in the world of HR that is all about bring your authentic whole self to work, and they're so touchy-feely and they're completely out of tune with the reason businesses exist, which is to drive shareholder value. That's been hammered into our heads. That has to be important. If it's not important, then you're just a motivational speaker, and no business is going to want you to work on them because they think you don't get it, right? So
Mhm.
everyone gets in their own little echo chambers, and then we get this narrative that it's either people or profitability, and you have to lose one in order to gain the other. And you sacrifice one for the other. And great leaders are able to kind of find the right balance of how much can we take from profitability to help our people in order for everything to thrive together. And I'm suggesting that that's a false narrative, that there is this surrender way, which will explode your profitability and allow your people to reach their full potential, which is the win-win for both. But you have to be willing to let go.
Mhm.
And that's the hard part.
Yeah, I've heard that said so many different ways from like I had an early mentor like maybe 15 years ago, and he's like, my rule is simple in every area of the business with every employee, with everything I do, is if I'm right, everybody else is wrong. And if I'm wrong, everybody else is right.
Mm,
And it's just like
interesting.
beautiful, just like quick reframe of like curiosity and humility instead of the, the ego trap of like, I know, or I have data, or I have validation. And then and my other one is a student says I already know, and a master says thanks for the reminder.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And that one always resonates deeply with me because when I help companies scale, that I can say probably 50% of the time when I go in, if I had to put a label on what got in the way, is that a sense of entitlement creeped its way in. And without them realizing, they stopped embodying things that they did in the beginning that actually
Yeah,
worked and drove the revenue because they were intangible. And then I come in and we get back to doing those things. And magically, the business doubles, the business triples because that entitlement went away. And I think that's even to tie it to accountability, or for me as a Christian, where obedience comes in, is continuing to do the things because they're attached to a bigger mission or a bigger reason. Even if I get to the point where I'm like, I don't know if I should be doing this. Well, unless I
mhm.
can replace that feeling or that person and create that same outcome, then it's still my responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's this idea that took hold of psychological safety. And the idea is, as leaders, we need to create a safe environment for people to speak up. And if we don't, then you're not going to reach your innovative potential because people won't speak up. And I think that's true. But I think we leaned so heavily into psychological safety that we forgot a little bit about psychological bravery, which is that, like, again, I am making a personal choice to focus on what I can control. And
Mhm.
so, am I brave enough to speak truth to power? Or am I waiting for permission? And so we all have a responsibility in the way that we show up.
Mhm.
And I think these are very Christian lessons. I mean, newsflash, every great leadership author was actually just a Christian using Christian principles
I was
without
going to
the
say that.
religious language. Yeah. I mean, Stephen Covey, they're all Christians, and they're just taking this wisdom and they're making it more palatable for a corporate environment and then saying, here, I've got a good idea. Servant leadership. I came up with it myself.
I literally
Uh,
almost at the beginning of the show, I didn't say it. And I was going to say in one of my things, it's like I've probably read 1,000 books at this point in my career on leadership and personal development. And now, as I've gone through my entire Bible, I'm like, I read all the wrong books because they're all in this.
Yes, totally. And my book included, right? Surrender to lead. These are godly principles. I'm saying that because I feel like I can say that on this podcast, but I don't go around talking about that, when I'm at a big conference with a bunch of CEOs because it can be off-putting for people, which is interesting in and of itself. And I do respect everyone's, you know,
Mhm.
their beliefs are their beliefs, whatever. I'm not here to change your beliefs about religion because I'm not a minister, but I am here to, not that ministers are doing that either, but whatever. The point is, I'm here to help you drive results and make your life a little bit better. And I think these principles are universal because of that. It is ancient wisdom.
It is. And I know for anybody listening to this, they're going to be annoyed with me that I use this reference again, but I always joke about this like ancient wisdom and these principles. And by the way, the difference is, and I love this conversation, is you have data to back it up,
Yeah.
right? And you've created tangibility and things that you can measure and taste through seeing this. But I always joke, it's like if you ever remember a fortune cookie that you got the fortune of and it had like a piece of life advice on it. I was like, does everybody remember those? They're like, yeah. I'm like, how many wish you actually followed what it said every single day and realized your life would be drastically different now if you did? And I like when I keynote, everyone's hands go up and I'm like, yeah, like there's a reason principles exist and they stand the test of time. And it doesn't matter how cute we try to get or how complicated or how processed we go. If it
Yeah.
advocates us from doing those principles, then we're going to lose the game. Even biblically for me, it's like my sabbatical Saturday. It's the only day you won't get a hold of me. But other than that, like my job is to be obedient and to like serve what shows up in front of me. And so I think there's so much power in that. And because we've talked about surrender to lead, can you just kind of take us through maybe like set the tone for that framework? Because you talked earlier about like beliefs and then driving behaviors. But I know the book's coming out and I'm excited to read it, but I want to kind of hear your take on the surrender to lead process or principles that you have.
Yeah. So at a high level, we begin with the mindset required to be a surrendered leader. And there's an assessment you can take too to see where you fit on that
Mm,
line of, surrendered leader to command and control leader. And so you have to get your head right, which is first of all, breaking the illusion of control, understanding where you stop and others begin, even as the CEO of a large organization. Once you've got your mind right, then you can execute on your role as a leader because you are there to do something. And what is it that you're there to do? You're there to create clarity, alignment, and accountability. So
Mm,
the book walks through these three phases, clarity being step one, which is understanding why you exist, where you're going, the core narrative of who you are, what the key results are, the strategic drivers, the beliefs that are necessary. This is the number one question that I will ask a leader when they're trying to workshop their challenges. Question one, where are you going? What is the goal that you're trying to achieve, the future vision? And then let's name it. They measure and find a measurable goal for that. Great. Question two, what are the beliefs that are currently getting in the way of you achieving those results? That's it. That's where you start to unpack truth from fiction. And the next follow-up kind of 2B is, and what do you want those beliefs to be? So you
mhm,
have to identify the beliefs that you want to nurture, that people need to hold. And this is where humility comes into mind because every leader has a bias about the kind of culture they want to create. And it could be that maybe your bias is a people first culture, right? And maybe my CEO's bias is an execution discipline focused culture. And maybe another leader's bias is an innovative culture. That was very popular, right? Silicon Valley. And so we studied this. Another one of our research projects with Stanford Graduate Business School, we looked at all of these companies and we looked at 8 different culture types. And there was only one that was significantly correlated with revenue growth, and it was an adaptive culture.
mm,
What does that mean? It's not people first. It's not execution focused. It's not performance driven. It's actually the ability to move from one to the other and then back again and then to this third thing in response to the environment and the needs of the business at that time, which means you have to be humble enough to release your bias. Sometimes people first doesn't win. Sometimes there are moments in your business's organizational evolution where you need to get people to sprint to the finish. And if they need to work on nights and weekends, they're going to have to do that if you're going to succeed. And then there's going to be moments where we need to take a chill pill and back off. And then we're going to invest in our personal growth. And to be able to go back and forth, not just back and forth, but through all 7 of those different culture types, that's the superpower. And that requires humility because the barrier to that is not people not knowing how to create and activate change. It's people being attached to the way that they like things, which is that it's a lack of surrender. So once again, okay, so clarity is number 1. Who do we need to be and where are we going and how are we going to get there? 2 is alignment. And that's where, how do we get people on board with this and that buy-in? And that's where you really you focus on intentional experiences that will shape the beliefs, that will get people to opt in to take action so that you can get the result. We call that the results pyramid. And that's leaders focusing on feedback, storytelling, and recognition. And then the third element is accountability, which is getting people to go from below the line to above the line and making that personal choice. So we will literally teach this language The language in itself is powerful. To teach people the language of below the line and above the line, once your team is familiar with that, you're on a team call and you can look at each other after being below the line for a while and just say, I wonder if we're below the line right now.
Mhm.
And then now you've done this non-attacking way of shifting the narrative, because the alternative is, listen, George, stop being such a victim. Okay.
Yep.
It's not sales' fault that you didn't get your number or whatever, right?
Yep.
That's the way we usually say, let's stop being such a victim. So I wonder if we're below the line right now. How could we shift this conversation to be above the line? What's going on? What about that can we control? What else could we try? What are we going to do by when? Now we're above the line. So that language in itself is an activator of change. And so getting people to do that as a leader, I would think instead of CEO, we like to call CEOs chief repetition officers, because
Mm.
your job is just to repeat yourself over and over and over again about the clarity that you want to create, the alignment you're trying to create through recognition, storytelling, and feedback, and then the accountability through these frameworks. So, I mean, it's a really practical book, even though it sounds like a super touchy-feely book.
I just have to own the fact that like you have a fanboy over here.
Yeah,
And
I love
you
fanboys. Welcome.
done. My favorite color is pink. I joke you not. Like I'm a good colorful fanboy. I'm like my heart is swelling right now with happiness because like you even bring structure to what I do every day and in a more succinct form. And I love it. And you'll appreciate this quote. I teach these things called scripture statements, right? And basically like if you know your movement and the reason you exist, if you find any good company, any good leader, any good speaker, and you were like removed yourself, there's like 3 to 5 things that they always say, and they say them all the time, and that's like what they're remembered by, right? And
Yeah,
one of mine that I took from the Marine Corps that you just said is leadership is saying the same exact things as many times as required till the last person gets it.
exactly. And you
And
know what prevents people from doing that? Fear of looking stupid.
yep, I was just gonna say that. Like
Sorry, I stole your thunder, but go.
no,
That's it.
steal away. This is your podcast. Steal away. But I joke with people because like even in my relationships and friendships, I say things so many times, they now make fun of me at dinner and they're like, well, what are you going to say? Right.
Yeah.
Student says, I already know. And I'm like, yeah. And then like 6 months later, my best friend's like, hey, man, I finally get it. Like, it's changed my entire perspective on everything. And I'm like, yes, like, because I lived that. Like, I promise you, I'm saying it because it works, right? Or how many times we have to hear, like, gratitude is the antidote to anxiety, right? Or
Yeah.
authenticity. And so I love the practical application of this. It's so powerful and it's so succinct and it's so true. And I
Yeah.
also love, one of the things that I teach, I'm helping a company right now and they have a massive internal culture issue, but they live below the line. And I was
Mm,
like, until you install a shared belief system, a shared value system, or even a shared set of standards, every time you try to give feedback, it's a personal attack. But if you can
yeah.
take it outside of the person and be like, hey, do you see this thing? We're above the line or below the line, or like, this is what we've agreed upon. Now you can use the power of declarative language of like, hey, I feel like we might be below the line. I feel like we're not
Yes.
embodying one of our values. Like, what could we do? It actually neutralizes the enemy and the interpersonal resistance or reactance that comes up because it's not me attacking you. It's me with humility being like, I realize we are below that line or above that line. And so for anybody listening, also the way that you describe that is a masterclass in declarative language and communication, which I love. And so
Let's go to 2.1, 201, class 201. I'm trying to do the advanced lesson. Can I do another tool for
please,
your listeners in declarative language? That was level 1. Okay, we're going to level 2. So let's say it is personal. Let's say we're not on a team call, but you and I are having a conversation and you piss me off and I'm mad and I resent you and you have hurt my feelings, right? So here's the language. If going back to the results pyramid, results come from actions, actions come from beliefs, beliefs come from experiences, right? And this actually happened. I'll tell a real story because storytelling is a powerful driver of
we're
beliefs.
breaking the fourth wall left, right, and
Yeah,
center in this episode.
just everywhere. So when I first joined Culture Partners, I was new kid on the block. They just acquired my company. I'm now going to be the face of the company. And there are people that had been at this firm for 20 years that I would imagine probably wanted to be the face of the company, felt that they deserved it because they knew the IP much more than I did, obviously, because I came with my own set of IP. And they were resistant to my arrival. We'll just call it that. And so I was kind of on alert at all times, trying to figure out who's on my side and who's not. So I'm on the executive call one day and I decide we're going to start doing research with Stanford. I want to test the IP. I want to bring credibility to what we've been preaching and I want to make sure that it's true. And if it's not true, let's find out and adjust. And so I present this plan to the executive team about everything that I'm going to do at the Stanford Graduate Business School. And this guy, Eric, who's the chief product officer, starts chiming in. It's like, well, I don't know how that's going to work. I mean, where is the budget going to come from? And how are you going to get access to the companies? And is the sample size big enough? And he starts just asking me all of these questions, poking holes in it. And I am aware Eric is one of the enemy people, right? He's not on my side. So I build a bunch of resentment. I get very upset. I avoid Eric. I ice him out of my project and I just keep acting normal while I do my own thing so I can prove Eric wrong along with anyone else that's on Eric's team. And then I'm working through the content because I'm learning the IP of Culture Partners as I'm, integrating my own IP and doing this research. And I've come across this tool for these moments and I applied it. And so here's the tool. Okay. I go back to Eric and I said, Eric, the experience I had when you asked me all those questions led me to the belief that you don't believe in this project or that you think that it might be a bad idea. Is that the belief that you would like me to hold? Boom. Now it is personal, right? But it is giving him space to identify his intentions, right? And this really happened. Eric goes, oh my goodness, Jessica, the experience that the belief I want you to hold is that I am all in. I love doing this research. I have done this at Gartner. I am all in. I think you're brilliant. I love you, but I'm really good at stress testing projects and making sure that we fill the gaps so that we don't fall into any pitfalls. And I was just trying to make sure that you were going to be successful. So this is where the masterclass actually comes. Then Eric goes, the belief I want you to hold is that I'm all in. What experience do you need to get from me to hold that belief so that I can change your belief? And now he's asking me so that I can say, well, first of all, it'd be great if you could help me, blah, 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 right? And I give him a bunch of things. And I'm like, and by the way, could you declare on a executive call how bought into my project you are? That is the experience I would like to see. He's like, absolutely. I'll do this, that, and the other thing. If I do all those things, will those experiences be enough to shift your beliefs or do you need more? And he's just checking in again, right? So now that is intentional culture creation, because if culture is how we think and act to get results, we're naming and framing how we think and act and the assumptions we've made about each other. And it is personal in that moment. And I've had moments where I'm crying with colleagues because I've said, the belief I hold is this. And we get to the truth, and we become, it is hard to do because it does require being vulnerable to feedback. And,
Yes.
I am one of the people that hates getting feedback, believe it or not. I'm very sensitive. I'm a very, very sensitive person because I've been given a lot of feedback in my childhood and I see it as a threat. And so a lot of people have that, right? And so we have to make it less threatening.
I loved that. I loved that. I have offline things to share with you. I love that. And if you're wondering, well, it's our moment, right? I'll fill you in. DM me if you want to know what they are. Can you just say the line again? I don't want to butcher it, but I love that framing of like the experience I had was in the belief. Can you say that line one more time?
Yeah. So if you have a negative experience with someone, what you can say is the experience I had when you insert situation led me to the belief that insert the belief that you hold about them. Then you follow up with the question, is that the belief that you would like me to hold? And then ideally they would respond with, the belief I want you to hold is insert the belief. What experience do you need from me in order to hold that belief? And now you're activating culture intentionally by naming and framing what it is.
It's so good. It's so good. I could do this with you all day, but I wanna ask. There's one actually burning question I've had as we take this surrender through line like all the way down,
Yes.
because I can imagine I feel like surrender is a lived experience, and once you feel it, you can't unsee it, and you sometimes have to coach yourself back into it, but you know that's your new like North Star, your new keel in the water. But for
Yeah.
somebody who's like hearing this the first time, or they're like, surrender, oh my God, like how can somebody tell if they're actually on the right track with surrender, like for them personally or even with their team? Like what are some signs or feedback that they'll see or they'll notice so that they have some, correlation that like this is me surrendering and this is what progress looks like?
Oh, it's such a good question. And I think that it will depend for each person. And my answer has evolved over time too. At its simplest intellectual level, if you're focusing on yourself and not others, you've made it halfway there, right? Because to surrender is to focus on the way that I'm showing up. For me right now in my practice and the evolution is when I'm breathing and I know I'm breathing, then I know that I am in surrender because I spend a lot of my time breathing without knowing I'm breathing. You know what I mean? I'm just, what's the next thing? You're in the action trap. Like I'm just, okay, after this, I got to go walk the dogs. Then I got to go to violin class. Then and I've got this constant thread of activity that I'm trying to keep up with and trying to get to the next thing so I can get to the next thing. And like my greatest meditative moment is I'm breathing and I know that I'm breathing. I will literally say that as a mantra just to remind myself. And, when in doubt, here's another little trick to get you back into the surrender mindset. When in doubt, do nothing. I think we move way too quickly and jump the gun very often. And there is power in pause in leadership, and it is a power that is being underutilized in corporations right now.
I have to say, there is power in pause. I've
Yes,
said this on this podcast 100 times, because anything that comes from you reactively is not going to create the result that you want.
exactly. And if you're trying to figure it out, then you haven't figured it out yet.
Hmm.
The truth becomes so clear once you are at it.
Hmm.
Once you're at truth, it is very clear. So whenever I'm trying to figure something out, I am just not. I'm not there yet. And I just continue to wait until something becomes clear. That is really hard for leaders to accept because it feels like with the speed of change, AI, economic uncertainty, political upheaval, we've got to do something to react in the moment. And very often the answer is no, you don't. You just think you do. You're in the trap. You're in the action trap.
100%. And I was joke, because the best advice I ever got is, I was at the end of my life. I was suicidal ideations, trying to overcome the addiction. I had like lost everything. And
Mm,
I ended up in Costa Rica to become a breathwork teacher. And the first question he asked me was, "What is the purpose for your life?" And I said, "That's why I'm here." And he said, "Wrong answer. I'm not teaching you until you can answer that question." And the former Marine came out, and I was F bomb this, F you this, fighting. Like, do you know what I could do to you? Like, I'm not proud of this. I'm a very loving Christian man now, and I do not swear or cuss, but I had a moment, and I ended up in tears, and I was like, where am I supposed to find that answer? And he said to me two things. The first thing he said is like, you've never sat quiet enough, long enough to hear God's whispers. And it
mm,
rocked me, like rocked
yeah.
me. And I'm like, then what do I do? And he said, just go sit until you have an answer. And it took 3 days. I've talked about this story before. And I woke up one morning, Jessica, and I swear to God, all I had written on a piece of paper was, what was the purpose for my life? And I had no answer. I went through tears, frustration, anger, all of it. And then I woke up one morning with peace. It was like the third morning. And I wrote down, I just picked up a pen and it like streamed through me. And it just came out like it was nothing. And then I became a breathwork teacher. And it's the number one thing. And even there's an incredible book, if you've never read it, from Keith Cunningham, called The Road Less Stupid. And at the every one of his chapters, he tries to tell, and he's built massive $500 million businesses. The most important thing you can do is have silent reflection time. Like, if the
Hmm.
answer hasn't revealed itself yet, it still needs to stay in the oven, but you have to
Hmm.
create that space. And we end up becoming a victim in that action trap instead of pulling the ripcord. And I'm saying this for everybody listening. The ripcord is a pause and a breath. If your
Yeah.
emotions are driving your actions, you're going to lose the game. when you can exist with your emotions and acknowledge them and then choose a different action, that is actually from vision. And the first one is from trauma and reaction. And so I had to like nail that in the coffin because you said it so well. I was like, just give me a minute.
That's so brilliant. Can you tell us what the cliffhanger in that story is? What is your purpose?
So
We
I
got to know.
wrote it down on a piece of paper and I'll never forget it. And it's ironic too, because my branding is a lighthouse now. And this will make complete sense to you. But what I wrote down on that paper, this was 11 years ago, was my purpose is to stand with structure in the face of resistance to create possibility for others.
Wow.
And
That's beautiful.
I'm uneducated. I barely made it through high school. Those are big words. It was just God flowing through me. And then
Yeah.
ironically, over the years, as life went on, my brother worked for me. I built my own website, never really had a brand. I had tagline relationships beat algorithms. It's like the thing I want to do in the world is teach people the power of relationships over money and all this stuff. And then one day he remembered that story and he's like, do you realize that your branding is a lighthouse? And my favorite lighthouse quote is lighthouses give light because giving light is its nature. It's not interested in who gets it.
Mm,
And then like everything I
wow.
teach, every model, every framework is all under that lens. And I found that notebook and I had one of those days of like 6 hours of tears, like weeping over this
Yeah.
notebook and like realizing all of those pieces that God had its way in. But that is what I wrote on that paper.
That's crazy. Can I show you something?
Please.
So I have this lighthouse in view of my desk because what is the purpose of light? The sole purpose of light is to give. It doesn't take, it just gives. The sun just gives, right? And so my purpose is to serve God and others.
Mm.
And the amount of coincidences on this call, you remember I said I had a spiritual experience, which was it was a coincidence, too coincidental to be too coincident. I feel like we've had 10 of those on these
100%.
calls.
I'm
It's just
about to
so
cry right now.
I love
And
it. I mean,
I have to tell you, is that a Lego lighthouse?
no, it's
Okay.
not.
I will send you a picture. I
Okay.
built the Lego lighthouse and it has an operational light in it that sits on my desk at home and it spins around.
Oh, no way. I have to get that. I'm going to get that.
I will
I mean,
text
I
you
have
the link to it.
Please do. I have lighthouses everywhere in my house.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it is a whole thing. That is wild. I mean, my purpose is to serve God and others, and I have no idea what that looks like. I have no idea what I'm supposed to do at any given moment. And so I just keep going and I keep trying to do my best, and that is all we can do, and
Mhm.
sometimes all it looks like is taking a breath.
And I love it because this is before I ask, we'll wrap this. We're doing number two. But we gotta wrap this one and land the plane. But it reminds me, in Psalm 119, it says, "Your word is a lamp for my feet, a light on my path."
Mm,
And one of the things that I had to learn when I had to learn how to surrender is it's only the next step. It's not the next 10 steps. It's not the next 20 steps. Like faith and surrender is trusting that when you take that step, something will be there, but then the next step reveals itself once you're standing in that new place. You can't control, the next 85 things. It's no different than being a Marine. Like we would practice for 6 months before we went into a mission in Afghanistan or in Somalia, but it wasn't because we were trying to control what our enemy did or what happened. It was so that we could be adaptive when it did happen, that we could make an adjustment and trust ourselves in that process. But that is like the biggest act of surrender. And so that's where the active part comes in. And so I resonate so deeply with this.
Can I tell one more quick
Please,
story?
please.
So Moses, he's leading his people and he's being guided and he's saying, okay, where am I supposed to go? And God is like, just keep going, right? And then he hits this water and Moses is like, okay, God, like there's water here. I don't know what's going on, right? And I don't know if a lot of people know this. I mean, a lot of people know the story that the waters parted, but the waters didn't part until he took the first step, When he took the first step is what that action is required of us. That is the power of surrender, is that it's not, he didn't just sit down and say, fine, forget it. There's water, right?
Mhm.
He kept having faith and walking, and he took that step, and then the waters parted. And so there is
Mhm.
absolutely an action step part of this process, which is
Yes.
you just show up and do your best and focus on what you can control. And what you can control is the steps taking the next right action. I have
Mhm.
this shift model, and I'm not going to go through it, but the last part of the shift model is take the next right action,
Yep.
not just more action, but the
Nope.
right one. Yeah,
Oh, we
beautiful.
I'm all in it right now. Just to add one little thing to that.
Yeah,
That story of Moses is so powerful for everybody listening as he leads them out of Egypt into the promised land. And what was supposed to take a year or two ended up taking 40 because of a lack of obedience and faith and surrender. Because every time they would get faced with resistance, like, but why is this happening? Why don't I have this? And it was all below the line.
yeah.
And then those moments would force them into surrender to move above the line. And then the moment they
Mm.
did, Moses was replaced with Joshua. And then Joshua was the militaristic leader that then was like, now's the time because God said go. And then he goes. So the amount of like correlations in that are mind blowing.
Oh my goodness. This has been such a great conversation. I had no idea how much I was going to enjoy myself.
Me neither. I'm literally emotional right now. I'm just gonna own that. My heart is
Yeah,
so tickled.
me
Um,
too.
okay, so before we wrap all of this,
Yeah.
where is the best place for people to connect with you?
Okay. I'm on Instagram,
Yep.
Jess_Kriegel. I'm also on LinkedIn, just Jessica Kriegel. But if you're interested in the surrender idea, go to surrendertolead.com. And you can pre-order the book. It comes out January 27th. If you do, we have a whole bunch of tools that will give you like workbooks and a surrendered leader assessment and builders. One of the things we'll give your listeners for free if they're interested in finding their why and their goals and their core narrative of who they are. We have a workbook on that called it's your personal results equation builder. So if you go to personalbuilder.surrendertolead.com, you can download that for free, and it'll walk you through this process of kind of figuring out your North Star and your why and your goals and the beliefs that you need to hold that you may currently be holding that are getting in the way of you achieving your goals, and what you want those beliefs to be, so that you can start to shift your own leadership style before you then take it to the larger team.
Mm, I love that. And for everybody listening, I will make sure I have all of these in the show notes. I will have her Instagram. I will have her LinkedIn. You know, I would connect with her LinkedIn, but you all know that story on the podcast. Her Instagram, her LinkedIn, Surrender to Lead. I have the one question. Is there an audio version of the book too?
There will be, but not
Okay.
until after it comes out. But
Okay.
I have my next recording session for the audiobook tomorrow. So
Oh,
we
perfect.
are
Perfect.
doing it
So
ourselves.
I'll make sure that I link everything for all of Jessica's stuff. I'm gonna have Jessica back on the show. I have no idea what we're gonna talk about. We might talk about shift, or we might just have a conversation about divinity and the Bible and God and how it. I don't know. We'll figure that
We
out.
didn't
But
even talk about my death doula work. We should talk about that.
we
That's got
didn't.
some juicy stories
We
in
have
it.
a lot of open loops to unpack, and
Yeah,
I would do a podcast with you like every day. I like thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I like turned into a little kid at the end of this. Once all the coincidences started to hit, I just turned into this like little kid. Um,
totally.
the one question I want to ask you, and this is how I end every show for the right guest, but I'm really excited to hear your answer to this. So I want you to, you've seen the movie Men in Black, where they
Yeah,
do the flashy thing and everybody forgets everything that they heard or saw. I want you
yeah.
to imagine that everybody listening to this forgot the first 1 hour and 6 minutes of this conversation. But you
Okay.
have a moment right now to tattoo wisdom on their soul that they would take with them forever, that they won't forget, that they'll remember, that they will leave with, and the imprint of your legacy or your views or your values on them. My question is, what would your tattoo wisdom for everybody be?
Hmm. Can I steal from someone else?
Always.
I mean, my mantra, that's silly. It's not my mantra. But my catchphrase, the tattoo, is let go and let God. It is
Mhm.
so cliche, but cliches stick for a reason, you know? They stick for a reason, and to let go is to let go of all the pressure that you're putting on yourself, It's to let go of all the expectation of what you want the world to look like, of the way that you wish it were, of what you want out of other people, the delusion that you can control people, places, or things. You can't. And so when you let go of that, what's left is the only thing that there is, which is God. And when you let God, then unimaginable things are possible.
Mm.
You know, my moment of letting go and letting God was that bottom that I hit 5 years ago, and my life has been beyond my wildest dreams since then. Financially, yeah, fine, but I would give that all up tomorrow if I knew how to pay for my daughter's private school and if I had a little bit more courage, you know? Like, the
Mhm.
only reason I'm attached to that is because I'm still growing.
Mhm.
But the thing that I have grown in is integrity. It's in knowing that I'm doing good in the world, knowing that I'm being present for the people in my life that I love, and that all happened when I stopped trying so hard, you know? So, that's what it is, and it's nothing freaking new.
No, no, I think that that's the most powerful part. And eventually you hear it enough until it resonates deep enough for you. And then you're like, now's the time that I believe it.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
everybody's journey is unique, which is the most beautiful part of this whole game. And so I've just learned now I'm going to take all that wisdom and integrate it because I was wrong enough for most of my life. And I always ended up in the same place. And
Yeah.
I'm like, so if I just listen to it, I just cut out that whole period of suffering. So I'll choose the temporary fear that comes up and the courage needed to delay all of that pain that would come. And so I love it. So I have to put a bow on this and we land the plane. So for everybody listening, let this be the invitation. Maybe for one of you, this was that catalyst. Maybe something Jessica shared, a story I shared is one of those quote unquote coincidences that just landed. Or maybe you don't want to white knuckle it anymore. Maybe you're so exhausted and burnout is creeping up on you because you're trying to control everything. But there are so many parts of this episode that you could go back to and just choose one of those things, whether it's with a team, telling stories, giving recognition, or asking for feedback, whether it's using declarative language and giving yourself a better container, whether it's surrendering and sharing that journey with somebody else, whether it's using those 4 questions to navigate or help empower somebody on your team, or maybe it's asking those 4 questions to yourself when you realize you're falling below the line and having some level of responsibility so that you can take control of your version of your life, your vision, your destiny, and take action. But the most important thing, and I'll say this a million times over, is don't let this become shelf help. It's one thing to hear it, and it's another thing to take action on it. Because if you want your beliefs to shift, those beliefs only shift through action that is aligned with where you want to go. And the more you take that action, the more it becomes a default, but it still requires action. So pick one thing from this episode. Maybe it's breathing, maybe it's pausing, or maybe it's anything else that we shared, but let this be the one where you give it a chance. And giving it a chance means gives it more than one day. Try it for a week, try it for a month, and then earn the right to come back to this episode and pick up another thing to try. But do one thing and allow yourself and give yourself that gift for you to be able to experience what comes on the other side of this. And so I promise you, I will have Jessica back on the show, if not for you, for me. But with all that being said, Jessica, thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming and sharing and all of this.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so grateful. It was really a moment of connection for me, and I'm just so
Yeah.
glad that I was able to meet you.
Yeah, me too. And so for everybody listening, this has been another episode of the Mind of George show. I believe my mind belongs in a straitjacket, so I just share the safest parts with you. Welcome to the journey. You will either see me in the next episode or you will hear me in your earballs, but either way, we're all done.